Going to the phones, calling from a 508 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Wista Mike.
Wista Mike.
From Wista Mike, that's right. Actually, though, unfortunately, I now live in the Great Plains states of Nebraska.
Oh, all right. Well, whatever.
Maybe not unfortunately, but I do. So,
Mike,
I was figuring.
Mike,
go ahead.
Back off your phone for a minute, okay? Because it's a little bit,
it's
a little bit hot. Yeah, just take it easy, buddy. Back off.
That's better.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'm excited. I thought I would call to give you just a sense of what's going on in our school district for the going back to school.
Okay.
So our kids go back to school on the 11th of August, which is next Tuesday. And 2 weeks ago, they released their plan that we will have a virtual plan as well. So they basically were 100% in person until, and actually, I'm sorry, it was not 2 weeks ago, it was last week. So last week on Tuesday, they said, and I quote, "If you are genuinely concerned about your children, you can sign them up for the virtual classroom, but they will not be part of the school system, so they will not be in the classroom with their friends or their actual teacher. It'll be a whole other set of teachers." They had a Q&A session virtually on Tuesday. They got 1,800 questions about what they're going to do with reopening, how they're going to close it, what happens if somebody gets sick, all the questions that parents have. They said they would answer those questions, but it will take them a little while because there's 1,800. Then they released on Wednesday the sign up for virtual, and they gave you until Friday of that week to sign your kid up for virtual. And if you didn't, then you had to go in person. So they announced it on Monday. They educated us about it on Tuesday, and they expected you to fully register by Friday. And they still haven't sent out the 18 answers to the 1,800 questions. So anyway, that's how they're doing it here.
Well, I appreciate the call, Mike. I mean, I can tell you that in New York, anyways, what's happening is not too dissimilar. However, I mean, we have to declare by Friday of this week whether our kids are going fully remote or what they call blended, which is 2 days, 1 week, 3 days the next week in school, and the rest of the time out of the school. If you're in one or two of those categories, you cannot, you don't mix. It's the same situation as there. My understanding is that teachers who are older or have immune system issues will be teaching the remote classes. And so you will not see your teacher, I guess. I mean, it's a new year, so you wouldn't have seen them anyway. You wouldn't even know who they are necessarily if you opt in. You won't be in with your friends. You'll be in with other, but your friends aren't, you don't know what classes you're going to be in anyways. So you're going to be in with like a whole nother, you're going to be in basically a separate track. Now, the difference is that with us is that at any time, is my understanding, you can drop out of the blended and go to the fully remote. And 4 times during the year, you can go from fully remote into the blended, like almost like an open enrollment period that you would see in insurance. But this is 4 times a year. The problem is, of course, that it's basically like transferring to a different school and once you do that. But, we still haven't made our decision. I don't know that's going to be the same for both the kids. My heart goes out to the teachers. because, well, obviously they're in the most risk, I think, in all these situations. But they're not, the schools are just not getting the support. There's no national guidance. There's no even state guidance, as far as I can tell. I mean, it really is horrific. And I, we've been talking to some other parents about setting up a pod, and then we're like, well, is this a pod for the days they're not in school? Or are we talking about doing a pod where it's like they're not going to go, they'll just do remote? And on one hand, you're like, well, if it's a pod when they're not in school, then you're increasing like the problems, unless these are kids who are in their classroom already, because you're combining two different sort of like networks essentially. And then the other question is like, okay, and how much are we exacerbating the general inequality of what's going on with something like this? Because this is, we have the opportunity to sort of like pool our resources and get maybe like, a single, babysitter or a paraprofessional or something like that. I mean, there is. And then it's also like, okay, are we helping though the school system because they only want half the kids in there at any given point? And if we have enough kids that opt out to just virtual only, I mean, it's just a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
It doesn't sound great. I was going to ask you actually what you think of all of the sort of well-to-do parents who are hiring their own private instructors and getting together their own backyard micro schools. Because to me, on the one hand, obviously it's probably not helping public education. It's not helping equality, but like that would be a good thing if the state would pay for everyone to have that, right?
I mean, it would. I think so. I mean, it would, if you had them all separated, it would diminish the risk to teachers. I don't know how you would actually go about doing that. Like, where would you find the space, right? Like, and if the schools had enough time that maybe they could isolate like the classrooms in that way, and maybe they'll be able to do it. I'm with you on the exacerbating. But it's if they stay in the remote program for the school, then the school still gets the funding. They are still considered students of the school. I have mixed feelings about what you're talking about because it really is an existing problem of inequality. In the short run, that helps the school. The fact that like maybe 50 kids are going to be, in 5 different or 10 different backyards, it helps the school, right? Because the less students they have, but that they have credit for teaching, gives them more resources per student and makes it logistically easier to do it. At the same time, it also just feels like all we're doing is exacerbating the pre-existing inequality. But I don't know if if that becomes a priority during this instance, when it's also talking about like, it's diminishing risk to the teachers. It's a horrible dilemma. I mean, I don't have an answer to any of it. I mean, at one point, like, we're going to have to get some type of childcare. And that's like, well, if we're getting, childcare, maybe we diminish the risk to everybody by making that just one person who is also helping with school, right? Because if I add another person to the pod, which is a babysitter, so that my ex and I can go to work or be at work, then that person is also touching my kid, not physically. I mean, but I'm saying like in terms of potential contagion. Then my kid takes that into school. So that's one more person that my kid is exposed to that could possibly infect the people in school and vice versa. I mean, the whole point is, right, we're trying to like keep networks separate. It's just it would be a challenging thing with funding and some form of consistent message that people could believe coming from a national government. But we don't have those two things. And so then it becomes almost impossible. I mean, I think like, look, I don't feel like we have a sense of what the risk is. Right here on my computer, I have, where is it? I have, on one hand, I have a report put out by a bunch of pediatricians. On another hand, I have, stories that are coming from Georgia. Like we don't have, it's very difficult to sort of parse through this. My sense is elementary school kids, probably they are the safest. They may not communicate it in the same way that older kids do. You still have teachers who are in danger there, and teachers are in danger of the other, each teacher also endangers each other. I mean, it's like going into work without masks. It's a mess. Here is Donald Trump calling in to Fox and Friends. Now, it's like I can express this type of frustration. The frustration is real. The misinformation is real, but there's only so much I can do about it. This is the president of the United States. To the extent that there is confusion, a lack of preparedness, a fear that exists to go into these classrooms, this guy is, and I don't mean this guy, I mean this guy, he's not on my paper. That guy is responsible for it. Here he is calling into Fox News. Sound. Not hearing any sound.
Kids is, will my children actually be going back to school? Could the plan that exists now change later? Teachers unions out there making demands like take the cops out of the school. We need Medicare for all and crazy political demands that feel like extortion. Yet to a parent, they want to know, will it be in person? Will it be virtual? If I'm in a private school, are they going to treat me? Do they put the same parameters the governor did on the government schools? What is the latest on your view of how these schools should reopen?
My view is the schools should open. This thing's going away. It will go away like things go away. And my view is that schools should be open. If you look at children are almost, and I would almost say definitely, but almost immune from this disease. So few, they've got
Pause it for 1 second. First off, kids are not immune from this disease. They're not immune. They can catch it, which means they can give it to other people. A. B, the idea that this idiot would go on and say this is going to go away like he did 6 months ago before 100 and almost 60,000 people in this country have died. More than that, who will have health conditions that will last possibly throughout their lives. The idea that he could say that and then pivot to, they're sort of immune. Like this is, if this guy was not the president of the United States, you would see people contacting the FCC to have this guy arrested for fraud. Go.
Hard to believe. I don't know how you feel about it, but they have much stronger immune systems than we do somehow for this, and they do it. They don't have a problem. They just don't have a problem. I mean, literally in New Jersey, where you had many thousands of deaths, the governor, Phil Murphy, told me, good guy too, by the way, but he told me thousands and thousands of deaths. It was hard hit. There was only one person under the age of 18 who died of this, and I think that person also had diabetes, a young person. It doesn't, and especially when you get younger than that, it doesn't have an impact on them. And I've watched some doctors say they're totally immune. I don't know. I hate to use the word totally because the news will say, oh, he made the word totally and he shouldn't have used that word. But the fact is that they are virtually immune from this problem. And we have to open our schools. Remember this, and I think you believe this, Pete. It's very bad for our country to be locked into a house, an apartment. What's going on with suicide? What's going on with drugs? What's going on with depression? What's going on with so many other things? People lose their jobs. They never get it back. They have a great job. All of a sudden, that little business or that big business is forced to close. This is a very bad thing. This isn't like, oh, we have a choice of one or another. One is good, one is bad.
I mean, the idea that he is leveraging this stuff to say that we should open up businesses too is just, it's insanity. It's insanity.
Well, why do you think they want to open up schools? It's not because they value children as human beings.
Well, on Donald Trump's from Donald Trump's perspective, yes, it is a way to make sure that people are able to go and work. Presumably, there's a lot of people who want to open up schools because, particularly in, for example, in New York, there's literally 200,000 kids who are in the schools, and they don't have, they're homeless. They rely on school for food. I mean, in fact, it's far more than 200,000 who are relying on schools for lunches. It's also their only opportunity to come in contact with a mandatory responder if there's any type of abuse going on with the children. But on top of that, too, for a lot of these kids, it depends on sort of like where you are in, in the context of school. But a year's worth of missed education is really hard to recover from. And of course, the people who would be the hardest to recover from are low-income kids who have less educational opportunities at home or just in their community or wherever it is. And so Donald Trump is not one of them. And I don't know if there's anybody in the White House today who is, but there are very, very sincere and legitimate concerns about kids staying at home. But yes, I would agree. Donald Trump is not one of them. I don't think, unbelievable. Here's I am from Bushwick teacher. I'm a teacher in Bushwick. After speaking directly with state officials, they basically expressed that every school is on their own. The repeated theme was each school needs to make an individual plan based off of individual needs and resources. No plans for additional funding for schools that need. They know teachers will be impacted and contract the virus. They know this will continue to disproportionately impact communities of color. The writing is on the walls. School staff and teachers are expected to sacrifice themselves for the economics of the city. The fact is, teachers are not essential workers because in-person instruction is not essential for human survival. All of that is true. Like I don't know how you can force teachers back into this situation. Like, a lot of the private schools, at least in the city, is my understanding, are going remote instruction only. And I suspect that's because there isn't that leverage. We have this feeling of like, well, it's a public school, and if they're public workers, they got to be there. Period. End of story. And we have that attitude because they're public. I'm not saying we, I'm saying generally. And I don't think that there isn't that attitude in the private schools. And so they don't have the same leverage over the teachers. Teachers are just like,
Well, Public school teachers have something that private school teachers don't in large numbers, which is unions. And
Correct.
I think we're going to see a lot of activity from teachers' unions coming up. And I think we already are. And it's going to be a crucial factor in what happens next.
Yes. I think it's quite possible that I may not end up going, or my kids may not even have the opportunity to go back to school because the unions might step in and say, like, look, we need to protect our workers.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. And all those quote unquote political demands that the teachers unions are making that they say have nothing to do with health, like Medicare for all and getting the cops out of the schools, cops that have been shown to repeatedly harm the children. That's I would say that's somewhat connected to health.
Well, I would also say you need less people. You want less people in there, and you want less, in the school. Period. And yeah, these. It's if you have Medicare for all, you have a better confidence that the kids coming into school have gotten medical care. I mean, it's that simple. Like, you want to feel confident that there's not people out there going like, oh, they would have gone to see the doctor, but they didn't want to spend the money. Like it's a crap show. It's a crap show.